Boys, girls, babes, welcome back to the Janaea Talks Caps podcast. Today, as the title of the episode states, it is Projection Mania time. We are going to be making a number of predictions regarding the upcoming season, and if you know me at all, when I'm making predictions, I am not just blowing smoke out of my perfect ass. No, I am delivering an educated hypothesis based on facts, based on trends, based on trajectories. Oh, who am I kidding? Yeah, there's some fact involved, of course, but at the end of the day, it's just gut feelings that I have. However, those gut feelings do almost always turn out to be right, so you're better off to listen up and place your bets accordingly. So, opening night lineup. Well, it's not as simple as you may think in order to predict such a thing, because there are a couple of wrenches that have been thrown into the gears as far as injuries, suspension, and then of course that lovely nightmare known as the salary cap. So it's not just as simple as that, they just pick the best players. No. You can't do that anymore in the salary cap era. What we have to do instead is first, pick the best players, and then see if all of those players actually fit under the salary cap, and if not, then who should we cut? And again, cutting players is not as simple as just cutting the guys who are the least effective on the ice. No. The CBA comes into play there too, because you have to look at who is and who is not waiver exempt, which players can be sent down to Hershey without having to clear waivers, what type of cap hit do they have, does sending them down create enough cap space? No? Okay, you're back to square one. Of the players who do require waivers to be sent down, which ones do you think you'd be able to sneak through waivers without having some other team claim them? In which case, you lose them for nothing. Do those players have a large enough cap hit that it will make enough of a difference to your cap compliance if you send them down? No? Okay, start all over again. So you see what the Caps and every other NHL team for that matter are dealing with here. Of course, you want to evaluate the players and see who best fits into your lineup performance-wise, and you do that, but then you also have to balance what their cap hits are, what their waiver status is, potentially the risk of losing them for nothing on the waiver wire, etc., etc., etc. And so selecting your opening night roster is not always as simple as meets the eye. There's a lot more that goes into it than just who the best players are or who's had the best training camp. So first, I will give you what my opening night lineup would be, injury and suspension free, and if we lived in a magical world where the salary cap were not a concern. And that would look like a top line of Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, and Tom Wilson. A second line of Jakub Vrana, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and TJ Oshie. And a third line of Carl Hagelin, Lars Eller, and Richard Panik. And then a fourth line of Brendan Lepsick, Nick Dowd, and Garnet Hathaway. And on defense, it'd be Michael Kempny with John Carlson, Dmitry Orlov with Nick Jensen, and Christian Juice with Radko Gudas. And then I would have Phoenix Copley, who has some NHL experience now, backing up Braden Holtby. Copley had a pretty decent season last season, while Vitek Vanacek and top prospect Ilya Samsonov, I would have them gaining valuable experience and playing time, most importantly, in the AHL with the Hershey Bears. You want these guys playing as they continue to develop. You don't want them sitting on the bench. And that would be my opening night lineup. I would keep around Chandler Stevenson, who's had a great training camp, and Jonas Siegenthaler as the extras. Now, like I said, that's in a perfect world. Unfortunately, a perfect world is not where we reside, so we have to make changes. One change, actually, that the Caps have already made is that today the Caps placed defenseman Christian Juice on waivers in order to, hopefully, fingers crossed, send him down to Hershey. That is, if he does not get claimed. So, this is not indicative of Juice's play on the ice. In fact, quite the opposite. As Todd Reardon had previously mentioned, Juice as one of the options to play alongside number one D-man John Carlson in the short term, as Carlson's regular partner, Michael Kempny, is expected to miss the first game or two at least of the season while he continues to recover from off-season surgery on a torn hamstring. So, no, Juice's on-ice performance has been good. He's had a very good training camp, and he should be on the roster. But where he gets screwed, and it is partially his own fault, or at least the fault of his agent, where he gets screwed is by his cap hit. It's too high for a 6th or 7th defender on a team pushed up against the salary cap ceiling. So his cap hit this season is $1.25 million now. And the reason that I say it's partially his fault, or at least the fault of his agent, that he's being waived right now, is because Juice and his agent elected to file for salary arbitration in this offseason. So Juice's camp, along with the Caps, went before an arbitrator, and Juice was awarded a 1-year, $1.25 million contract. Now, you would think that would be a good thing for Juice, and he probably thought that it was a good thing at the time as well. But the first thing I said when I saw what the arbitrator had awarded him was, wow, so he's either getting waived or traded. Literally, that was the first thing I said, because the Caps simply can't afford to have him on their salary cap at that number, not when they're so far pushed up against the cap anyway. So there's defensemen like Jonas Siegenthaler and Martin Fervery who are still on the NHL roster, and they're both waiver exempt. So you might ask, hey, why not send them down to Hershey instead? Money. The answer is simple, and it's money. Siegenthaler's cap hit is only $714,000, and Fervery's cap hit is only $805,000. That might not seem like a big difference, but it is a big difference when you're pushed up against the cap ceiling, and literally every penny counts. So, what happens is Christian Juice and his $1.25 million cap hit get waived instead. Speaking of guys who might get screwed because they had an arbitration hearing, Chandler Stevenson is sort of in the same boat that Juice is as well. And just like Juice, it's kind of Stevenson's own fault, or at least the fault of his agent. Stevenson and his agent, of course, they did also file for salary arbitration this summer. And Stevenson, like Juice, was awarded a contract which at this point is a little steep for what the Caps can afford, measured against what Stevenson brings to the roster. He was awarded a 1-year, $1.05 million contract. Now, don't get me wrong, Stevenson has had a great training camp. He looks like he really took his offseason seriously, and he's playing some great hockey. But the problem for Stevenson is that fellow fourth-line hopefuls like Travis Boyd, Brendan Lepsick, and Shane Garsick are only making at most $800,000 against the salary cap. Boyd's cap hit is the highest at $800,000, and the other two come in at $700,000. So again, it doesn't seem like much, but when you're counting every penny, that $200,000 difference between Stevenson and Travis Boyd, for example, or that $300,000 difference between Stevenson and either of the other two, that can literally be the difference between you being on the Capitals roster or being waived and either claimed or sent down to Hershey. It's that important. So in some of these cases, these guys, they literally would have been better off to take a little bit of a lower salary and lower cap hit. It would have been better for their NHL careers because they would have had a much better chance of actually being in the NHL, which is important when you're trying to have an NHL career. But it's probably something that they weren't really thinking about when they went to arbitration, and now that is just unfortunate for them and for the Caps, because the Caps sort of have their hand forced a bit as far as roster decisions. But for now, Stevenson is still here. He hasn't been waived yet, so we'll see what happens. I'm sure they're trying to see if there's a way that makes sense that they can afford to keep him with the Caps. Like I said, he's had a pretty great training camp, I think better than a lot of the Caps management team actually expected him to have. So the Caps right now still have 25 names on their roster. The maximum allowable is 23, so they still have 2 more guys to cut. But Evgeny Kuznetsov also does not count among those 23 while he is suspended for the first 3 games of the season. So technically, for now, they only actually have to cut 1 more guy. At least that is until Kuznetsov comes back. Kuznetsov's $7.8 million cap hit also does not count against the Capitals' salary cap until he is back. So all of this shit with Kuznetsov actually buys the Caps some very valuable time to figure all of this out. But once Kuznetsov does come back, as it stands, they're still $2.7 million over the cap with this current roster. Obviously, they'll still have to cut 2 more guys, and I actually would say with almost 100% certainty, barring any sort of trade or injury, that they will end up cutting 3 more guys and going with a 22-man roster out of necessity due to a lack of cap space. So the Caps are also still carrying 3 goalies at the moment, but that won't last. And I actually think that the reason why they're still carrying 3 goalies is actually because they're still mulling over their options cap-wise. I think coming into camp, like I had mentioned a little bit before, I think coming into camp, Chandler Stevenson was originally probably going to end up on the waiver wire. I think that was the plan. But Stevenson's play throughout camp has forced the Caps to possibly alter that plan. And so now they're seeing what else they can do. And I think one of the options that they're strongly considering is to have Ilya Samsonov, not Phoenix Copley, be the backup to Braden Holtby instead. It's not ideal if you ask me, not because Samsonov isn't super good, but simply because I'd rather he be getting a ton of playing time down in Hershey rather than warming the bench for Washington, as Holtby gets most of the starts, as he should. But keeping Samsonov instead of Copley would save the Caps about $200,000 against the salary cap. Copley makes $1.1 million against the cap, while Samsonov only makes $925,000. So again, this is another one of those situations where Copley's lucrative new deal may actually end up hurting his NHL career. So I think overall, when we factor all of this in, the lineup on opening night is going to look something like this. I have a top line, of course, of Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, and Tom Wilson, a second line of Jakub Vrana, Lars Eller, and TJ Oshie. Of course, Kuznetsov was suspended. A third line of Carl Hagelin, Chandler Stevenson, and Richard Panik. And a fourth line of Travis Boyd, Nick Dowd, and Garnet Hathaway, with Brendan Lepsick starting off as the extra forward. And there is a reason for that, which I will get to in a moment, because the Caps do really like Brendan Lepsick. And then on defense, we've got Martin Fervary with John Carlson while Kempny is out injured, and then Dmitry Orlov with Nick Jensen, and then Jonas Siegenthaler with Radko Gudas, with Tyler Lewington as the extra defender. Now, you could have Siegenthaler skating with Carlson instead if you wanted to, and have Fervary with Gudas, but I'm personally of the mind that I would rather have Siegenthaler start skating with Gudas right away and start getting used to him, since that's who he's going to be playing with for the long haul. Fervary is more than good enough to last a few games with Carlson without something terrible happening, just while Kempny is finishing up his recovery. Kempny, it's not expected to be much longer before he's back, by the way. Maybe only 1 game, maybe 2 games. I would say probably 3 at the most. Of course, things can change day by day, but it doesn't sound like he's going to be out for too much longer. The Caps, actually, they don't want to put him on injured reserve because they know that he's going to be back very soon, so they don't want him to have to miss a set number of games. So that's why they're opting not to put him on injured reserve. And then I do think, like I said, that we are going to see Ilya Samsonov backing up Braden Holtby. Now, obviously, when Kuznetsov returns from his 3-game suspension and Kempny returns from injury as well, things will change again. Our lineup for the 4th game of the season is going to be different than our opening night lineup, and our lineup for the 4th game of the season should give probably a much better indication of what the Caps will actually look like for much of this upcoming season. And I think that these first 3 games, while Evgeny Kuznetsov is out of the lineup, these are going to be maybe the 3 most important games of the entire season for Chandler Stevenson and Travis Boyd. Because, like I said, the Caps really like Brendan Lepsick. They signed him for a reason, and so I think Lepsick ultimately is going to be in the lineup on that 4th line for much of the season, assuming that all goes well. And so I think Todd Reardon and his coaching staff are going to use these first 3 games while Evgeny Kuznetsov is out as sort of a final audition, if you will, for Chandler Stevenson and Travis Boyd to ultimately help them to make the decision of who they're going to keep and who they are going to waive. Kuznetsov's suspension buys them 3 regular season games to figure it out. An important note as well is that by keeping Ilya Samsonov over Phoenix Copley, that extra $200,000 that, remember, I told you it doesn't sound like a lot, but it is. That extra $200,000 gives you that little bit of extra space that you need so that it does not have to be Chandler Stevenson who you waive if you don't want to. It can be Travis Boyd, and you can still get away with it just barely. So these first 3 games of the season are going to be huge for Boyd and Stevenson, and may the best man win. So jumping ahead to the 4th game of this season, I think what you're going to see is this. And again, this will be a much better indication of the lineup that you'll probably see for much of this season. So I'm going to say it's going to be a top line of Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, and Tom Wilson, a second line of Jakub Vrana, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and TJ Oshie, a third line of Carl Hagelin, Lars Eller, and Richard Panik, and a fourth line of Brendan Lepsick, Nick Dowd, and Garnet Hathaway, with whoever wins the battle between Chandler Stevenson and Travis Boyd being the extra forward. Then on defense, I think you'll see Michael Kempny back with John Carlson, Dmitry Orlov with Nick Jensen, and Jonas Siegenthaler with Radko Gudas. I think after getting his first taste of NHL action, they will send 19-year-old Martin Fervery down to Hershey, where he will get a boatload of playing time, and they'll keep Tyler Lewington as the extra defender. And then, as I mentioned, Copley's gone, and Samsonov is backing up Holtby in a cap space saving maneuver. I think ultimately that's what you're going to see, and it's going to be a very good Capitals team once again. I actually think this Capitals team is going to be even better than the one that won the Metropolitan Division last season. And speaking of the Metropolitan Division, let's project what that's going to look like as well. I think, first of all, that the Washington Capitals are going to win their 5th straight Metropolitan Division title, the drive for 5, if you will. Like I said, I think that on paper, this Capitals team is better than the one that won the division last season. Again, on paper. We haven't seen any games yet, but on paper, I think that this Capitals team is better than the one that took the ice last season. But where I think you will see some shifting of the power within the division is from seeds 2 through 8. I think that the New Jersey Devils are going to make the biggest gains. The Devils finished in last place in the division last season with just 31 wins and a negative 53 goal differential. So they definitely do have a lot of room to gain. You can only really go up from the bottom, but you'll remember that this offseason they were able to trade for star defenseman PK Subban. Still not sure what the hell Nashville was doing there. They as well selected Jack Hughes with the number 1 overall pick at the 2019 NHL entry draft, and then they were subsequently able to get him into a 3-year entry-level deal as well. So he's ready to go. They signed Wayne Simmons in free agency, and then they made a trade with the Vegas Golden Knights as well that brought KHL star Nikita Gusev to New Jersey, and they were able to get him inked to a new deal as well. So for people who maybe don't know yet who Nikita Gusev is, he can probably be, I would say, a point per game player in the NHL. He is very, very, very talented. Whether or not that translates over to the North American ice surface and the North American style of play, that's always, yet to be determined. We have to wait until we see the games. But I think he has that talent and that potential to be, where he can possibly be a point per game player in the NHL. The Devils were one of the biggest winners of the offseason, and they should be able to climb significantly up the standings because of it. I think as well, talking about teams that have improved, the Rangers and the Flyers are both going to take some strides forward. The Rangers, of course, landed arguably the biggest fish of the unrestricted free agent market, signing Artemi Panarin to a 7-year contract, and they were able to pry Jacob Trouba out of Winnipeg as well. Lots of people I'm seeing that are forgetting about that, actually forgetting that it happened. Trouba was a restricted free agent who they subsequently signed to a 7-year deal worth a total of $56 million or $8 million per season. They had to trade a good young player in Neil Pionk as well as a first-round draft pick in 2019 to the Jets in order to get Trouba. The Rangers also drafted Capo Caco, that's a great name, number 2 overall in this year's draft, and they've signed him to a 3-year entry-level contract as well. So they will be counting on him to add some offense. But the Rangers should be much better than they were in the 2018-2019 season. Whether or not I agree with or think that it's a good idea long-term to do the whole expedited rebuild thing, that's a whole other conversation for another day. But they will be better this season than they were last season anyway. I think that the Carolina Hurricanes are going to stay at about the same level that they were last season, which is neither great nor terrible for them. They're happy with just barely, squeezing into the playoffs. So that's cool for them. They will be minus the leadership qualities of Justin Williams, however. So that is something to keep an eye on. And then the Caps fans are going to love this, but I think that the Penguins are going to fall off. They kind of started the process of falling off last season, and now they have traded Phil Kessel and still don't have any cap space. So that should be fun. And I'm really torn up about it too. I'm really sad about it. That they're having to trade away core players and still don't have any cap space. It's really sad. And then the Islanders are going to fall off as well. I think anyway, simply because they are not as good as the standings last season would tell you that they are. They got a nice morale boost from hiring a great coach, Barry Trotz, who we know very well, obviously, and he did a lot to fix their defensive issues from a season before. But they also lost the goalie who was largely responsible for them winning the William Jennings Trophy as the league's best defensive team, and that's Robin Lehner, as he went and signed with the Chicago Blackhawks instead. And the roster is just really not all that good. They had a magical run last season, which I just do not expect to repeat itself this season. So I do see them slipping down the standings as well. And then I think the Columbus Blue Jackets are going to fall not just off, but way, 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 way off. Like, they might be the worst team in the division off. So it should be very fun to follow John Tortorella's media interactions this season. I mean, it's always fun to follow that guy and his interactions with the media, but it should be extra fun this season. Overall, standings-wise, come season's end, I think it's going to be your Washington Capitals in first place, the New Jersey Devils in second place, the Carolina Hurricanes in third place, and then the two New York teams in fourth and fifth. The Pittsburgh Penguins missing the playoffs as the sixth place team in the Metro, followed by the Flyers in seventh place, and then finally by the Blue Jackets, who will be at the very bottom of the pack, eighth place out of 8 teams. It's going to be a rough year in Columbus, I feel. The Metropolitan Division is going to be very tough, very competitive, as most of the teams in the division got better over the off-season. Either that or they were already really, really good and they didn't do anything to change that. So it's going to be a dogfight to reach the playoffs in the Metro. The Atlantic Division, on the other hand, leaves a lot to be desired. But hey, that's a conversation for another day, as we are running out of time here for today's episode. 2 more things that I want to do here today. First up, let's project some stats for all of your favorite Capitals for this upcoming season. We'll start with the forwards, and we will go line by line. First up, the captain, Alex Ovechkin. I'm going to say he scores the exact same amount of goals, 51, as he did last season. And I'm going to say he finishes with 90 points this season. Nicklas Backstrom, I'm going to say 24 goals, 81 points. Tom Wilson, he's going to crack 30 goals. He'll score, I'm going to say, 31 times this season, and he's going to end up with, I'll say, 57 points. Now watch Jim Rutherford's head explode somewhere far off in the distance as I make these comments. And then again, as it comes true. Jakub Vrana, he's also going to crack 30 goals for the first time in his young career. I'll say he's going to do one better than Tom at 32 goals, and he's going to finish with 60 points. Evgeny Kuznetsov, super motivated by his little, live action Narcos reenactment. He's going to score 30 goals for the first time, and he's going to lead the Capitals in points, matching his jersey number 92. TJ Oshie, ever reliable. I've got him for 26 goals and 55 points. Moving on to the third line, Carl Hagelin, I'll say 12 goals and 35 points. Lars Eller, let's go 14 goals and 38 points. New guy, Richard Panik, I think he's going to crack 20 goals with the Caps. I've got him down for 21 goals this season, and I will say 43 points. Brendan Lepsick, I'm going to say 10 goals and 25 points. Nick Dowd, I'm going to say 12 goals and 29 points. And Garnet Hathaway, I'm going to say 12 goals for him as well and 23 points. Then on defense, the big man, John Carlson, he's going to rack up 15 goals and 73 points. His defense partner, Michael Kempney, 7 goals and 28 points. Dmitry Orlov, I am looking for a big bounce-back season from him. I'm going to say he's going to score 9 goals, and he will tie his career high with 33 points. Along with playing much better defense than he did last season. Nick Jensen, I'll say 3 goals and 20 points. Jonas Siegenthaler, I do think he'll get his first career NHL goal, but it will be his only goal on the season. So 1 goal, and I'll say 13 points. And Radko Gudas, I'm going to say 6 goals and 24 points. As for the goalies, I've got Braden Holtby pegged for 37 wins this season, and I think Ilya Samsonov as the backup goalie is going to be able to pick up 13 wins. And all of these stats, of course, lead me into my last round of predictions for the episode, which is who's going to take home each of the major individual awards at the conclusion of this upcoming NHL season. Now, for the sake of this, we'll say that the major awards are, of course, the Hart Trophy, the Art Ross, the Rocket Richard, the Ted Lindsay Award, the Selke Trophy, the Norris Trophy, the Vezina Trophy, the Calder Trophy, and the Jack Adams Award. So, I'll start with the Art Ross. I do think that Connor McDavid's going to take that back from Nikita Kucherov. The Rocket Richard Trophy for the NHL's leading goal scorer. Do we even have to answer this one? The question is rhetorical, right? It's Alex Ovechkin. It's always Alex Ovechkin. The freaking award is going to be renamed after Alex Ovechkin. Yes, Ovi will lead the league in goals yet again. What else is new? The Hart Trophy, I'm going to go maybe way out on a limb here, but I'm going to say Alexander Barkov is going to win it with the Panthers getting back to the playoffs for the first time since the 2015-2016 season. The Ted Lindsay Award, I think McDavid's taken that one back this season as well. I think the players are going to vote him as the most outstanding player. The Selke Trophy, I would like to say that a guy who should have won about 3 of them by now, Nicholas Backstrom, that he'll win it, but we all know he never gets even close to the recognition that he deserves, so that won't happen. So I'm going to go with Barkov here as well. But now we get to the Norris Trophy, and I think finally this is going to be John Carlson's year. He's been robbed on a couple of occasions already, but I think finally people are going to have to really acknowledge just how good this guy really is. The Vezina Trophy, I'll go with Andrei Vasilevsky. For the Calder Trophy, I think Cale Makar from the Colorado Avalanche is going to win it. That kid is a stud if you have not seen him play yet. And finally, for the Jack Adams Award for Coach of the Year, I think Joel Quenneville, he's going to bring it home in his first season with the Florida Panthers because, like I said, I think they're going to make the playoffs this season, and he is going to be a big part of the reasons why. So there you have it, folks. That wraps up our Projection Mania episode. We are so close to the regular season now, you can practically taste it. It begins tomorrow, October 2nd, with your Washington Capitals taking on the defending Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. in a battle of the two most recent Cup winners. It's going to be a good one, and it's going to be one hell of a season yet again. So until next time, Caps fans, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe as well to our show wherever you get your podcast from. We're pretty much everywhere now, on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, etc., etc., etc. And drop us a review and or a rating if you feel so inclined. We would really appreciate it. And stay classy, babes. Oh, and one more thing, because the season starts tomorrow. Let's go, Caps!